We're not going to send in Marines and Army units. If you go in and you're going to do this, it can't be done in half measures. It's got to be done completely and fully. In a way, yes, these people have to die, or they have to be arrested, put in prison for the rest of their lives. Have to make it to where the people want to police themselves.
Hey guys, welcome to the Patriot Point Show. I'm here with my co-hosts Alexander Gordy and Randy Rozzell. Today we just wanted to talk about kind of some things that are going on right now that I guess will affect people in the United States as well as overseas, and we just kind of wanted to talk about kind of a current event. Our current president Donald Trump, he recently categorized cartel organizations as terrorist groups, which kind of redefines the playbook, right? The rules playbook on how we can address that threat. And obviously with the fentanyl epidemic that's kind of going on in the United States right now, obviously the southern border, and we're filming this from Texas, so it's kind of a poignant issue that impacts all of us. I'm sure, myself included, have had friends and relatives that have had addiction issues. So that's something that we wanted to talk about today. I specifically really want to ask Randy a few questions, just because obviously Randy, with the Special Forces background, being a Navy SEAL, and kind of also being in a leadership position within the SEALs, you kind of understand maybe some of the rule book on how we may go about this and how we may address this. So Randy, with Trump labeling the cartel organizations as terrorist groups, what do you think things are going to be going forward? How do you think the United States will address this? I think something that people have really been interested about is, obviously, we're not going to be able to use our special forces and our special missions units, those type of things, to deal with this threat. How do you think that plays out in just kind of a general overview?
Well, this is not something that we haven't done in the past, right? The war on drugs, right, from the 80s with Reagan, we used special operations units then to battle the cartels then. So it's not anything we haven't done before, right? So we don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel if we want to use our special operations groups to battle the cartels. Now technology has changed, so it's dealing with that, and obviously they're very well funded, but they've always been very well funded. So I think, as a former special operations guy, I think this is the exact way we would have to do it, is to use special operations, because we're not targeting Mexico, we're not targeting South America, right? We're not going to send in Marines and Army units. We're not going to be an occupying force. So working well with those host nations, with who they already have in place, with their law enforcement and their military and their special operations soldiers, they're going to know better than we are how the cartels operate, and then we just augment them, right? And we bring some of our capabilities to help them actually remove some of these key players. I think as a former SEAL, well, how great would that be? Like living in San Diego, heading down to Mexico, and then just coming back home.
Yeah.
That's an easy deployment cycle, right? No, I'm sure it would never actually be something as easy as that or as quick as that. But no, I think that's the exact way we'd have to target these cartels, is with our special operations group, working within the host countries, own military. You'll always have to worry about tip-offs, right? But with the capabilities we have today, and I know the cartels have capabilities, and I know they have tough fighters there, but nobody's tougher than our special operations forces. Our Navy SEALs, our Green Berets, our, Team 6, Delta Force operators, Rangers, Marine Recon, And nobody's going to be tougher than these guys to go down and handle those types of jobs. And like I said, it's nothing that we haven't done before. We've literally done this in the past, right? So.
For sure. I think another thing too that I've thought about is, I think we saw it kind of in Chicago with like the Bloods and the Crips and some of those gangs, that when there was like direct action on them, they would take out a lot of the heads, and it was kind of like a hydra, right? Like you cut off one head, two sprout up, and it was kind of became like a block-to-block war. And a lot of the violence, because I think right now, in some ways in Mexico, pardon me, some of the organizations, they're militaristic in the way that they're run, and so obviously it's very violent. But do you think that obviously, the U.S. forces going into there will take out a lot of the heads, I would assume?
Yes.
How do you think what do you think the evolution and kind of the track would be of you take out some of these top leaders, and then there's splinter groups off and things like that? What would be a rundown of how the United States would kind of augment, like you said, Mexican forces and kind of help that transition into kind of cleaning out the country in a way?
Well, I think it's twofold, right? A lot of these countries, part of their the way they sustain themselves is through the drugs, right? That's how. So if you're going to go in and wipe out a source of a country's income, you have to replace it with something, right? I mean, Afghanistan, it used to be agriculture. Well, then they found that they could grow poppy,
Poppy fields, yeah.
right, in poppy fields and make way more money, right? So that's got to be a concern. If we wipe out part of their GDP, if you will, their gross domestic product, then what are we going to replace it with? How is that country going to continue to make money? How are its citizens going to continue to make money and not fall into poverty, right? How do you make it where that life of crime doesn't pay? So that's got to be something we consider, because if you have a prosperous nation, less people are going to be inclined to do crime to make a way of living. So their normal way of living has got to provide enough of a lifestyle that people are at least content and can provide for themselves. Does that make sense?
Sure.
The other thing is, if you go in and you're going to do this, it can't be done in half measures.
It needs to be absolute.
It's got to be done completely and fully, where you're talking about, hey, there's splinter cells, or hey, we cut off the head and it's like a hydra, two more grow back. It's got to be done so completely and so, not viciously, but in a way, yes, these people have to die, or they have to be arrested and put in prison for the rest of their lives, and where people do not want to get in that line of business or work anymore because the consequences for doing it are so bad.
Is that similar to like what El Salvador is doing there now with their mass incarceration of
Yes.
MS-13 and
Yep.
they got those mega prisons
Yeah.
where it's very...
Yeah, they have like 60,000 plus people incarcerated.
And hasn't the crime dropped like 90%?
It's one of the safest countries literally in Latin America. Yeah.
So, what a great example.
Yeah.
Now, having all those people in prison you have to have the facilities, right? You have to be able to feed them. You have to be able to house them. Okay. Ideally, in such a way, you have to even be able to rehabilitate them, right? Make them where they can come out, if they're not serving life sentences because of what they've done. Well, how do you get them to come out and be productive members of society? So you kind of got to look at the full spectrum of everything. But I think you only win this with, special forces and enabling those governments, and then making those governments give them such an incentive that they want to help you, right? Knock out those criminals and those cartels, right?
I think that would be the hard part I see is, so like the past election in Mexico, the current president was considered the bloodiest presidential race of all time. There was like 60 people murdered in the candidacy and everything. And the corruption obviously in Mexico goes all the way to the top. So wondering if will the government there make a stance against the cartels, because that is one of their primary sources of income. We all know the cartels run Mexico. And so it's like not only battling the cartels that have the weapons and the drugs and everything, but it's also battling the government to enforce their laws and stuff. So how do we do that? Is that possible?
Yeah, I wish I had the answers for all of those questions. Yeah. Some of these things are a little beyond my pay grade, right? But, and then a lot of people like the cartels, right? They come into their villages or whatever, or their towns, and they build schools and they build hospitals and they win the populace over. So you have to have a way of doing that as well, where, however, there's something about dignity of work, right? So what kind of work do you give the populace that allows them to earn a wage that they can support themselves on and have dignity? Because nobody is really happy about selling drugs to children. And, what you do leads to the loss of life, right? Throughout different countries or whatever. Nobody can really feel good about that, right? And I've heard some other people talk about, there were former gang members and cartel members, talk about the heads of these and just how miserable they actually are, like the heads of the cartel, right? Because honestly, when your whole life, revolves around making other people miserable, right? Which is really what it is. Yeah. You can't really be happy with yourself, So I think those are all things to consider, right? And when we do go in, right, and we wipe these cartels out, we have to have a plan. It can't just be like, literally like we did in Iraq, where, hey, we're just going to go in, we're going to take out Saddam and, exactly, right? Or just like you talked about, Stefan, somebody worse will come in, right? So we have to make it to where the people want to police themselves.
Yeah. From the tactical side of things, Randy, how does you think that plays out? Obviously, would it just be DAs? With the team, with SF guys going or soft guys going in there? Or,
well,
how do you think that, obviously the cartels have a lot more capability than they ever have with all the weapons and the training, and a lot of the people that train up the cartels now are former, either trained by...
Yeah, unfortunately, what we would probably do is we would probably give one cartel a lot of money to wipe out the other cartels, right? And then we would just empower them. Right. Unfortunately, that's probably what we would do, right? Yeah. Now the Green Berets, they're good at going in and building, counterinsurgency, groups, right, where they would come in and build a guerrilla group to fight, and cartels always have enemies, right? There's always somebody that doesn't like them because they killed somebody's brother or cousin or whatever, right? There's always those groups, and Green Berets would go in and train those groups and teach them how to fight. SEALs, you look at, what SEALs would do, we would do to more of the direct action missions, where we just go in and cut the head off a snake. And so I think the combined of what Green Berets can do, what SEALs do, and then of course, going after the very high-hanging fruit is going to be Delta Force and SEAL Team 6, right? The real lead guys. Would be the best way of doing that. But what's always tricky, and what we've talked about, is not getting someone worse in there, somebody that actually is altruistic and wants to bring that entire country up. Because we're not talking about one country, we're talking about multiple, countries here, right? And I think, honestly, you have to take one at a time, right? Like first we'd have to have Mexico, right?
Yeah, that'd be the big one.
That would be the big one, right? We have to have Mexico first. And then from there, now we have a launching ground to go into South America. Now we do have the world's best Navy, right? And anywhere we park an aircraft carrier, we have the world's third largest air force. So these are, we can park those things
Yep.
all around
Show of force.
that continent. Our satellites now and the drones and all this. I mean, it brings different levels of, tactics and strategies into play that we can utilize. But I think it's got to be one at a time, one country at a time. And as they start to tumble, right, it will become a snowball.
Right. And you got to get the population behind it. So if
Yeah.
the population supports it, then eventually the government will support it because the people support it.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. Like, how are we going to enable those communities to sustain themselves? Now, a lot of them don't like the cartels, and a lot of them do, right? So it's kind of like, all right, well,
Yeah. Depends if they lost somebody, I imagine.
yeah,
Yeah, a lot of them probably like them through convenience or through that famous.
or it's all they've ever,
Oklahoma,
that's all they've ever known.
Yeah.
Like, as a young person, you probably look up to them. You look at Pablo Escobar,
Yeah,
right?
The Cartel songs.
I mean,
too, there's all the forget the music genre, but there's a whole genre of Mexican music dedicated to
yeah. So you got to, it's got to be wholehearted. You got to, try to change the culture, which is always difficult, right?
That's one thing actually so we started going down to Panama a lot. Originally we'd go down there, we'd off-road and stuff. And the only people that have those vehicles down there are the cartel. So we went off-roading a lot with the cartels and went and ate and everything. But so from seeing it firsthand, like I understand, like in Panama, there's no opportunity. There's the average income's like less than $5,000 a year or something. RN, we have a friend that's an RN for over a decade. She makes less than $20,000 a year. So even professionals and stuff don't make anything. So it's just if you want to make money in those areas, you just have to. The best way to do it is with the cartels.
Yes.
And stuff. And exactly that. They take care of a lot of people. They provide vehicles. They provide food. They provide shows. They open restaurants. So the culture themselves, a lot of times, really do like.
It's ingrained.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
so you can't leave that vacuum. Like, what is that company or country going to produce that is going to replace that amount of income that was coming into it from drugs? Now, however, I don't think we should keep them in place because we're losing our youth. Something has got to be done, right? I mean, how many thousands of young
more than
men
any
and
terrorist
women?
attack on the United States, all of them put together. I don't think it counts for potentially 1 year of.
Yeah.
That's not a statistic I want to be quoted on, but it's hundreds of thousands.
I mean, I think last year they recorded over 100,000 deaths from fentanyl in the U.S.
Yeah, it's the number one killer of like 18 to 30-year-olds.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Which is
What do you guys think about the legalization of some of these drugs? I know obviously
The what?
The legalization of some of these drugs that would take away some of the potential about that. Just playing devil's advocate. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't have a super strong opinion. I haven't put a lot of thought into that, but I know that's a talking point for a lot of people. Hey, if you legalize it, you'll be able to tax it. You'll be able to enrich states. Kind of like the whole how marijuana happened. First it was Oregon or Washington, and then it kind of went from there.
Canada's trying it out.
Are they?
If you go up there, they have clinics where you can walk in and get your heroin. They'll give you your needles. It's government supplied drugs. And so they're trying it there.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't
Canada's probably not
seem
a
to
great
be
blueprint,
working.
though, with everything else that they've.
First and foremost, I'm a Christian. And I don't think we stop evil by enabling it.
Agreed.
Okay? Drugs at their essence they're evil, right? They tear apart families. They tear down individuals, right? I don't stop evil by just not stopping to call it evil anymore or making it legal, right? I don't agree with making drugs legal because, in one thing too, now, as a father, how do I tell my kids drugs are wrong if they're legal? And my son's like, well, I just want to try it, Dad. And I'm like, now I can't be like, well, it's illegal, son. You could go to jail for that. He's like, well, it's perfectly legal. I want to try heroin. And now he's addicted to heroin for the rest of his life. How's that any different than these pharmaceutical companies that are creating lifelong patients, by making America sick? So I don't think RFK would go for that.
For sure.
I pretty much wholeheartedly disagree with it. I think the marijuana thing, I would have to, a lot of people argue that, hey, alcohol is worse for you than marijuana, and could we tax marijuana and make it legal? And then, but when you start talking about things like heroin and meth and, these drugs that make people literally insane, right? Because they're not just detriments to themselves.
It's everybody around
anymore. So it's now prohibition didn't work, but all it did was create actual alcohol cartel here in the U.S. But these things have been illegal for a long time, so it's not it's not anything that's been legal that we're trying to make illegal. It's been illegal the whole time. And I don't think we fix it by making it legal. I think we're going to cause more problems if we do that.
Yeah, I would think too, it goes with like the whole societal collapse of how people, just in general, the collapse of the family, the collapse of religion and everything. It's just society is going downhill in essence. And I think that the reversal of that will in turn reverse also the drug issue, because when you have better people, you have less drug problems.
Agreed. And hopefully now that we've got Trump in office, we're starting to have this swing back. We're starting to get rid of this wokeism. We're starting to get rid of, hopefully this attack on Christianity. Now we're back to having, men and women, hopefully we start these traditional values. These attacks on the nuclear family stop, right? And we start to reinstitute, masculinity, and femininity in the right ways, in their positive ways,
Stop rewarding splintered families with government aid and everything else.
Yeah, we stop incentivizing divorce,
Yeah. You can almost make a claim that our system is literally set up to promote failure, honestly.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you look at divorce rates, right, women are paid to leave.
100%. Most divorces are initiated by women.
Yeah.
Yes, like 80% or something like that. And they're paid to leave.
Yeah.
Okay, well.
I heard this one thing, it was talking about this term called divorce porn. I thought it was interesting because it's like, I think a lot of times you see in friend groups, like one woman will get divorced and then multiple women within that friend group will get divorced. And it's because they're telling like, oh, hey, I left. I don't have to deal with my husband anymore, and I get the alimony, and I got the house and the kids and the cars.
Yeah.
Yep, kept all the good stuff.
I kept all the good stuff.
Didn't have to deal with him anymore.
I got rid of this guy that I'm not a big fan of necessarily.
Yeah. But is that good for our society?
No.
Right? Now those kids are growing up with a barely present father, right? When you look at the jail systems, right?
Yeah.
How many of the people in jails, they
no
found like
fathers.
70 or 80% of them
It's everything.
came from single mother homes, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we're literally creating and incentivizing, more criminals, in a way. So, yeah, I think we're going to have this swing back now. At least I hope so. It feels like we are,
That's why we're here, honestly.
Yeah, and it starts in the home. That's where everything starts. But it is good that we have somebody in office now that supports all that. When Reagan came into office, that's what it was. He wanted to restore the family values and get back to what kind of the 70s was going away from it, right? And then Reagan came into office. It was like, hey, no, we're going to restore the nuclear family. We're going to restore traditional values. And then look how well we kind of did.
Yeah.
We did well as a nation.
Yeah. I don't think a lot of people realize too that there's so many comparisons you can make between the current Democrat Party and wokeism and all this stuff and how it is a Marxist belief in essence. I mean, it shows BLM literally is a Marxist group. It's on their website.
Yes.
And so I don't think a lot of people though have read Karl Marx's book, who first says that socialism is a stepping stone to communism, but also in the first 4 steps of instilling that into a society, 2 of them are destroying religion and the family, because the state has to be the ultimate source.
Yeah, the state is God.
So the state, exactly, the state has to be God for it to work.
Well, yeah, and which country has communists worked in?
No.
Which one, if you live in America, which one do you want to move to?
Yeah, yeah.
Right, so they're great about bitching about everything about us here, but you're like, okay, well, what country do you want to move to that has communism?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, you don't want to leave? You just want to stand here, you just want to stay here and bitch about this one, but you don't want to leave it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so that's how you know it's all bullshit.
Yeah, well, I mean, it sounds great, with equality and this and that and the other, but if you look at every single situation in human history where it has come into play, socialism, communism as a government form, it requires nobody to be self-seeking. It requires people to be honest, and the problem is that people that generally put themselves or try to be in power, you're going to have people that want to enrich themselves, and that's where the system doesn't work.
Yeah.
When the people at the top are enriching themselves.
What's like that quote? Capitalism is the worst economic system, except for all the others.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, our form of government?
Yeah.
Like,
Form of government, right?
Yeah, our
That's
form of
funny.
government, it's literally the worst.
Except for every other.
Except for all the others that we've tried.
Yeah. Any other country.
Yeah. I think too that a lot of people think it's a crazy thought that like we're not just switching to this form of government and everything. But if you just examine history, every country, they switch from forms of government back and forth, back and forth. It's like a continual thing. I think just most people are like, that doesn't just happen. Well, it does just happen. Like governments do overnight turn into other governments all the time.
Look at Venezuela.
Yeah.
Afghanistan in the 80s, or in the 70s, had nightclubs.
It's thriving. Yeah.
Right, it was thriving.
Same for Lebanon, all those countries.
Yeah.
I saw some photo the other day, and it was these beautiful Lebanese women walking around, face out, everything, and it was either in Lebanon or, Afghanistan or Iraq, I forget, but it was just, a few decades ago.
Yeah,
And
yeah. They were going to school. They were driving. Yeah.
I mean, Iran was literally.
They
like
were
the
getting
forefront
college
of
educated.
Yeah, yeah. Iran. I think up until the 80s or 90s. I mean, even they were very Western culture in a sense. Like they were big on their art. They were big on dressing. Like it was a complete different culture than it is now. But yeah, it's just crazy how much these places change literally just by whoever's in power, basically.
Look how much our country changed during COVID.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, it went to something unrecognizable. So, yeah. Well, what else you got, Stefan?
That was mainly my question. Just like kind of, I think you kind of answered kind of how that would look and kind of how things would play out. I think we pretty much touched on everything I wanted to ask. But anything you wanted to add, Gordy?
No, you're good.
As a special operator, I think it's a dream. I think, as a warrior, like we train to go do that job. What's one of the worst things is like, as a former football player, right? Going through, 2 days in training camp and all that, showing up to game day, and there's no other team to play. Right?
You guys need an adversary to be able to. That's the whole job.
That's the whole job. Most people go into special operations because they want to actually do some good, right? Some people go through and hey, I just want the challenge of it. Could I make it? Could I make it through buds? Could I become a Green Beret? But a lot of us have an actual warrior's heart, right? Well, I want to go test it now. Well, that would be a great way to test it. Killing some drug dealers, some people that are destroying our youth and polluting our country, with drugs. Oh, man.
Yeah.
How meaningful would that feel?
Yeah, it's a good thing to see the border closing up now too, because speaking to a friend that is a dealer still, literally from the week that Biden came into office, he said when Trump was on his first term, like it was hard to get drugs. The week that Biden took over, he said drugs were just flowing back into the markets. And
I mean, just look at how the border crossings have dropped. 11,000 a day to 227.
yeah.
Right? I
I didn't
mean,
even see that statistic, but that's,
yeah.
that's
Tom Holman is awesome. I love that guy. Right? So
He
I
gets some of the
think,
best responses.
oh yeah, well, and he's dead serious. You know, he's been there. He's been on the front lines of the border. He's opened those boxes of dead kids, and he never wants to see that again. So he is passionate about doing his job and doing it well. Yeah. So I love the fact that he's in charge of the border now.
I look forward to seeing all the improvements, honestly.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. Well, hopefully, you know, we stop losing our youth like Lake and Riley, you know, to being raped and murdered by illegal immigrants now.
Yeah. Yep.
For sure. For sure. Cool, guys. Well, thank you for tuning into another episode. You know, we got some guests coming up. You know, we're kind of doing a backlog now where we're getting more episodes in the pipeline to be able to release to you guys. You know, make sure you're engaging with us on social media. It just helps us produce this stuff for you. And yeah, I mean, anything you guys wanted to add?
I think if any of the viewers or anything, if y'all have any questions or topics or anything like that, feel free, email us, message us, put on the videos, anything like that. Just let us know and we can do some research and, you know, bring some more content for y'all.
Yeah. And remember, control the leftist population out there by having your leftists spayed or neutered.
Thanks, guys.